I still remember the sound of their laughter. Daniel and Megan walked away, leaving me standing at the Fayetteville airport with a single suitcase, $50 in my pocket, and a heart that suddenly felt older than my 74 years. They didn't look back, not once. To them I was just baggage, too slow, too stubborn, too broken to matter. They thought they'd already won. They had my house, my bank account, and the papers to prove it. I was supposed to disappear, quietly fade into the background like some confused old veteran who'd lost his mind years ago. But what Daniel and Megan didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for months. Every smile I'd forced, every apology I'd mumbled, it was all part of a plan. They believed I was weak. What they didn't understand is that a man who's fought 3 tours in Vietnam doesn't break easily. He learns patience, precision, and the power of silence. They left me at the airport, thinking it was the end. It wasn't. It was my beginning. I'd let them feel safe, certain that I was losing grip of reality. That was their first mistake. Because when you underestimate someone who's lived through war, you forget one simple truth. Survival isn't about strength, it's about strategy. And I'd been 3 steps ahead from the start. When my wife, Anna, passed away, the world went quiet. We'd been together for almost 50 years, half a century of shared routines, inside jokes, calm, and quiet mornings over black coffee. Suddenly, I was eating breakfast alone, staring at her empty chair. The house felt like an echo chamber of what used to be. I wasn't ready to live by myself, not right away. That's when my son Daniel and his wife Megan suggested I move in with them. "Just until you get back on your feet," Dad Daniel said with that soft, practiced tone people use when they're already making decisions for you. It sounded reasonable at the time. I told myself it was temporary, maybe a few months at most. The truth is, I wanted to believe my family still cared. I didn't see what was coming. The house I left behind wasn't just a roof and 4 walls. It was the home Anna and I had built from scratch back in 1987, paid in full with the money from my disability settlement. Every inch of that place told a story: the dented kitchen table where we laughed until midnight, the worn carpet she refused to replace because it still feels like us, the porch swing where she used to read in the mornings. I trusted Daniel to handle the bills for a while. Grief makes you vulnerable. It clouds your judgment. He told me it would be easier if the utilities were under his name. I signed a few papers, didn't think twice. That's what parents do, right? They trust their kids. But those temporary papers were the first door I opened that I'd never be able to close on my own. It started subtly. Daniel and Megan took over the finances to help me stay organized. They said I shouldn't worry about payments or paperwork, that it was stressful for someone my age. It sounded like kindness, and maybe that's what made it dangerous. Then came the comments, little jokes that cut deeper than they looked. "Pops, did you take your pills today?" Daniel would laugh loud enough for Megan to hear. She'd record it on her phone, pretending it was funny. They said it was for my own good in case we ever needed proof that I was struggling. Struggling. Maybe I flinched at loud noises or forgot where I left my keys sometimes, but that's not confusion. That's memory shaped by war. PTSD doesn't make you weak, It makes you human. But they didn't see it that way. The more I apologized for being a burden, the more control they took. I said sorry for things I didn't do, sorry for the noise, sorry for the space I took up, sorry for existing. I should have known better. Marines are trained to spot deception, but no one teaches you how to defend yourself from betrayal that comes wrapped in affection. One night I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Once the deed's in our name, we can refinance, Megan whispered. Finally get that pool, Daniel replied. That was the first time I realized what they were really after. It wasn't about helping me. It was about ownership money and control. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed Anna and I once shared, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't confused anymore. I was awake. People think abuse only looks like bruises or shouting, but sometimes it's quiet. It's being talked over in your own house, being called broken until you start to believe it. It's someone turning your grief into their opportunity. Daniel and Megan thought they had me cornered at my age, and PTSD made me easy to manipulate. They were wrong, because while they were busy underestimating me, I was already starting to take notes. It didn't happen overnight. Cruelty rarely does. It sneaks in quietly disguised as concern, until one day you wake up and realize you're a stranger in your own home. At first, it was small things, subtle, almost invisible. Daniel would sigh when I took my medication at the table, as if the sound of pills rattling in the bottle was too much for him. Pops is at it again, he'd joke to Megan, his voice dripping with sarcasm. She'd laugh, pretending to hide it behind her coffee cup. They started calling me the old man, then the broken one. Sometimes in front of friends, sometimes right to my face. I'd smile to keep the peace, but each word left a bruise somewhere you couldn't see. Dinner became the worst part of the day. They'd eat first using the nice china Anna had picked out years ago, and I'd wait until they were done. When it was my turn, they'd slide leftovers across the counter on a paper plate. "Don't worry, Dad, we saved some for you," Megan would say with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's the thing about humiliation. It doesn't shout. It whispers one small act at a time until it rewires how you see yourself. They controlled everything. My mail, my phone calls, even my appointments at the VA. If someone from church called to check in, Megan would say I was resting. When a neighbor dropped by, Daniel would meet them at the door and say I wasn't feeling well. They built this version of me that didn't exist, a frail, forgetful old man who couldn't handle his own life. And the more they said it, the more people believed it. It got to the point where I couldn't even open my own mail without someone questioning why. "Dad, it's just easier if we handle that," Daniel would say. Easier for who, I wondered. Meanwhile, my money was disappearing faster than I could keep track of. The BMW in the driveway wasn't mine. Neither were the Nordstrom shopping bags that piled up in Megan's closet. They said they were family expenses, but the only family being taken care of was them. When I asked about the charges, Megan would tilt her head and say, "You know, it's all our money now, Dad. We're managing things for you." Managing. That was her favorite word. It sounded responsible, even generous, But what it really meant was control. I started clipping coupons while they ordered DoorDash. I drove my old Honda Civic while they cruised around in leather seats. They'd come home with designer bags, bottles of wine, and that smug glow people wear when they think they've gotten away with something. Most days I stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that keeping the peace mattered more than being right. But every time I bit my tongue, I felt something inside me fade a little. There's a kind of pain that doesn't leave scars on the skin. It's the pain of invisibility, of realizing the people you raised have stopped seeing you as a person and started treating you like an obstacle. They thought my silence meant surrender. What they didn't know was that Marines don't surrender. We observe, we adapt, we wait. So I started paying attention. I took mental notes of every insult, every missing dollar, every lie they told the neighbors. I began saving receipts, recording little details no one else noticed. Because when someone spends their life trying to make you feel powerless, the smartest thing you can do is remind yourself that you still have a choice. And I was already planning mine. At first, I thought this fight was about money. It took me a while to realize it was about something much bigger. The house, my pension, even my reputation, each one carried a different kind of price tag. Some things could be replaced, others couldn't. Financially, the numbers were simple but painful to think about. The house I'd bought in 1987 for cash money I earned the hard way after 3 Purple Hearts was now worth around $285,000. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. Every brick in that place had been paid for in blood and years. Then there was my pension. 25 years as an aircraft maintenance specialist for Lockheed Martin had built up a quiet fortune, over $1.3 million in savings. Daniel and Megan had no idea. They assumed I was living on scraps, surviving off my VA disability checks. They saw a tired old man with a shaking hand and a cluttered mind, not someone who'd planned ahead for his future. Every month, $1,250 came in from the VA. It was meant to cover medication and small comforts, maybe a decent meal once in a while. But they treated it like pocket change, something to be managed, another resource to drain dry. But the money wasn't the part that kept me up at night. It was what came after. In a town like Fayetteville, reputation is currency. Veterans look out for each other. Once word spreads that you're losing it, you don't get that trust back. I'd spent decades earning respect through service, through honesty, through simply showing up when others didn't. If people believed I was incompetent, everything I'd built within that community would crumble. The VFW Post, where I'd been a founding member since the 70s, would see me as a liability, not a brother. The same men who'd shared battle stories and beers with me would start lowering their voices when I walked in. And it wasn't just about pride, it was about belonging. For veterans, community isn't optional, it's survival. But the hardest part, the one that still knots my stomach every time I think about it, was what losing the house really meant. That place wasn't just property, it was memory. It was the smell of Anna's cinnamon rolls on Sundays, the sound of her favorite record playing in the kitchen. The soft creak of the porch swing she refused to replace, even when it splintered. If I lost that house, I wouldn't just lose a roof. I'd lose every trace of her. Every reminder that what we built together meant something. And that more than anything was what scared me. See, when you've already buried the person you love most in the world, you think you've survived the worst. But then you find yourself fighting to hold on to the last pieces of them. Their laughter in a hallway, their handwriting on an old grocery list, and suddenly, you're right back in the trenches only. This time the enemy is your own blood. The financial stakes were high. The social fallout could ruin me. But the emotional cost, that was something I couldn't measure. They thought this was just about a house. It wasn't. It was about everything that house represented: service, sacrifice, love, and the life I wasn't ready to let them steal. And if I was going to lose, I wasn't going to lose quietly. When you've spent years in the military, you learn one thing above all else: patience. You don't rush into battle. You study the terrain, the patterns, the habits of your enemy. You let them move first. Then, when the time is right, you strike. That's exactly what I did. Daniel and Megan thought they were outsmarting me. They thought I was sitting in my room taking my pills, lost in fog and memories. But what I was really doing was reconnaissance, quiet, careful, and methodical. Every Marine knows that chaos is a cover, and while they created plenty of noise around me, I started looking for the silence between it, the places where their lies didn't line up. I began with the basics: real estate, law, property, deeds, notarization rules. I might not have a law degree, but after 40 years of dealing with government paperwork, I knew how to read the fine print. Fayetteville's county courthouse became my new battlefield. I spent mornings reading statutes, taking notes, pretending to be just another old man passing time with legal books. That's when I found it. North Carolina law requires any property transfer over $50,000 to have 2 independent witnesses and an official notarization by a licensed professional. Not one witness, not a scribble from someone's spouse, pretending to be legit. 2. The so-called deed Daniel had been working on his golden ticket to owning my home didn't meet any of those requirements. It had one witness, Megan. And the notary stamp looked fresh, too clean, like something printed at a copy shop. It wouldn't survive a minute of scrutiny. That was the first time in months I felt a real surge of power again. They had made a rookie mistake. I knew better than to confront them outright. That's what they expected: anger shouting, proof of instability. Instead, I stayed calm. I kept smiling, through dinners kept saying thank you when Megan dropped leftovers on my plate. Because when you're outnumbered, your best weapon is composure. Meanwhile, I started building my own case. I took photos of every piece of mail that went missing. I saved receipts from every joint account transaction. I recorded small conversations where they slipped up Daniel talking about refinancing, Megan bragging to a friend over the phone about the new pool they'd get once the deed cleared. Each bit of evidence felt like a bullet loaded into a chamber I wasn't ready to fire yet. And then there were the medical records. My doctor at the VA, Dr. Patricia Hayes, had been treating me for years. Every evaluation said the same thing. Mild anxiety disorder, well-managed, fully competent. No cognitive decline, no dementia, no confusion. That report would crush the narrative they were building. It's funny, people assume age means weakness, but what it really means is experience. You learn that the smartest move isn't always to fight harder. Sometimes it's to fight smarter. Daniel thought my silence meant surrender. What he didn't realize was that I was simply letting him overextend his position. Like a soldier advancing too far beyond his own supply line, he was getting careless. Every great battle has a turning point. Mine began the day I realized I didn't need to convince them of anything. I just needed to let them reveal who they really were. So I waited, and I watched. I let them brag, spend, and plan their future on the back of my supposed decline. All the while I documented everything quietly, precisely, and without emotion. Because Marines don't start fights, we finish them. And I was getting ready to finish this one. It happened on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind that starts like any other. I was at the kitchen table sorting out my medication, small white pills, in a blue plastic organizer Anna had bought me years ago. The light coming through the window made the kitchen look almost peaceful. But peace is an illusion when you're living in enemy territory. Daniel walked in first, face tight with purpose. Megan followed a second later, her phone already recording in that subtle, practiced way. They always said filming was for my protection, but I'd learned that in their hands a camera was just another weapon. "Dad, we need to talk," Daniel said. I looked up, meeting his eyes. Calm, controlled, like any Marine who knows he's walking into an ambush, but refuses to give the other side the satisfaction of seeing him flinch. "About what, son?" "About your situation." That word, situation. It carried the same chill as a diagnosis you already know you don't have. "I feel fine," I said, putting down my pill case. He smiled that patronizing, fake gentle smile I'd seen him use with clients. "You asked 3 times yesterday when dinner was." "That's not true," I said quietly. Megan stepped closer, phone angled to catch my face. "You put the milk in the cabinet last night," she added. "You don't even remember." I did remember. I hadn't touched their milk. I don't even drink it. But I stayed silent. When people decide who you are, logic doesn't change their mind. It just gives them new material to twist. Daniel pulled out a stack of papers from a folder. "We've been talking to a lawyer," he said. "Someone who specializes in family care." "Family care." I repeated, my voice steady. "Is that what you call this?" "It's not what you think," he said. "We just want what's best for you. Structure, support, professional help." I kept my tone even. "I see Dr. Hayes every month. She says I'm managing just fine." "She doesn't live here," he shot back. "She doesn't see the daily decline." That word again, decline. Like I was a building falling apart. They went on circling me like vultures pretending to be caretakers. I realized then that this wasn't a conversation. It was a setup. The papers in his hand weren't for discussion. They were a declaration. Megan said softly, "We just need you to sign these. They make things easier." "What are they?" I asked. "Power of attorney," Daniel replied. "Guardianship, technically." It means we can handle everything for you. Guardianship, a word that strips away a lifetime in one stroke. I looked at the papers. The signature line sat there like a trap, waiting for me to step into it. If I signed, they'd own everything, my house, my accounts, my freedom. But I didn't argue. Not then. Arguing would have given them proof that I was confused or combative. Instead, I leaned back, breathed slow, and nodded like I was considering it. "I'll think about it," I said. Daniel's tone sharpened. "Think fast, Dad. The meeting's Thursday at 2. The lawyer wants to go over it all." He stood leaving the papers on the table like a final insult. Megan slipped her phone into her pocket and followed him out. Their footsteps faded down the hall, leaving the air thick with something cold and final. When the door shut, I didn't move for a while. I just stared at the pill organizer in front of me, the same one Anna used to fill for me every Sunday night. The weight of it reminded me of something she once said: "Never let people mistake your kindness for weakness." She was right. I reached up and touched the small black recorder clipped inside my shirt pocket. It had captured every word, every accusation, every fake smile. They thought they were cornering me. They thought they were days away from victory. What they didn't realize was that I'd already started the counterattack. Thursday at 2. Perfect timing. 48 hours to prepare, to gather evidence, to line up every fact, every witness, every piece of truth they'd buried. Marines don't wait for orders when they know what's coming. They prepare for war. And war was exactly what they were about to get. That night the house was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel and Megan had gone to bed upstairs, probably congratulating themselves for how well the kitchen conversation went. They thought they'd worn me down, that I'd finally given up. But what they didn't know was that while they slept soundly in their expensive sheets, I was in the basement unlocking my war chest. Literally. It was a fireproof steel lockbox Anna had given me on our 40th anniversary. She called it my peace of mind box. I used to joke that it was overkill that I wasn't planning to hide state secrets in there. Turns out she knew me better than I knew myself. The box had been hidden under my old mattress for 3 years, not because I didn't trust people, but because I'd learned to respect the value of preparation. When the lid creaked open, I felt that same quiet focus I used to feel in the field when everything depended on what you did next. Inside were the documents that proved I wasn't the confused old man they claimed I was. First came the pension statements. 25 years at Lockheed Martin maintaining aircraft for military contracts. Every page stamped every contribution accounted for. The current balance, $1.37 million, was more than just money. It was my lifetime of service turned into numbers on paper. Daniel thought I was scraping by on my VA checks, but that was only the surface. The pension went into a separate account, one they didn't know existed. I'd learned long ago that sometimes the best way to protect what's yours is to keep it out of sight. Next came the original deed to the house, purchased outright in 1987 with my disability settlement. No mortgage, no liens. The property belonged to me and Anna alone. After she passed, I moved it from the safety deposit box to the lockbox. Call it intuition or instinct, but something in my gut told me The house might one day become a battleground. Then the most important papers of all my VA medical records. Every report written by Dr. Patricia Hayes, spanning over 15 years. Each one, clear and precise, mild anxiety disorder, well managed, no cognitive decline, fully competent. Those reports were my shield. Proof that the incompetent old veteran story Daniel was spreading was nothing more than a lie built on arrogance. But the papers weren't the only thing in that box. The real weapon sat at the bottom, a small black digital recorder, voice-activated, 60 hours of storage, bought at Radio Shack in 2023 for $29. For months I'd been using it to capture every conversation, every cruel comment, every whispered plan. 47 minutes of recordings, crystal clear. Daniel calling me crazy. Megan saying, "Once we get the house, we'll be set." The two of them joking about which nursing home would keep me quiet. Each word was a bullet. And then there was the final piece, a business card. Colonel James Porter, retired Marine, VFW Post Commander, licensed attorney and notary public, my friend for over 30 years. Porter and I had served together once upon a time. Different wars, same scars. He'd seen through more lies in courtrooms than I had on battlefields. When I called him earlier that day, I didn't have to explain much. Sam, he said he always called me Sam. Never Richard. You need representation. Maybe. Can't say much over the phone. He paused for half a second, just long enough to read between the lines. Bring everything Thursday morning. We'll go over it before your meeting. That's what I loved about Marines. You don't need to convince them when something's wrong. They just know. No. So, that night, under the dim basement light, I packed the lockbox back up. The papers, the recorder, the card, all of it. I slid it under the mattress again, the same way I used to stash my rifle before dawn patrol. This wasn't fear anymore. It was readiness. I wasn't the old man they thought they could manipulate. I was a soldier preparing for battle, one fought with evidence, patience, and the truth. And this time, I had backup. That Saturday afternoon felt like a performance. The Johnsons were hosting their annual neighborhood barbecue, one of those big community events that brought out everyone from the block families, with kids, retirees, and veterans from the local post. Usually I'd enjoy something like that. Good food, good company, the smell of charcoal and fresh-cut grass. But this time I knew better. Daniel insisted we go. It'll be good for Dad, he said to the neighbors, loud enough for everyone to hear. He doesn't get out much these days. To them he sounded like a caring son. To me it sounded like a setup. The backyard was packed. Kids ran around with sparklers. The grill sizzled. Laughter filled the air. It was the kind of scene you'd see in a small-town commercial for community pride. But behind every cheerful smile, I could feel eyes watching me. Curious, cautious, maybe even pitying. Daniel and Megan stayed close like handlers guarding a liability. I stood near the fence, keeping my back to the crowd. Years of military training had taught me one thing. Always have an exit. Then it started. Daniel approached a group near the picnic tables. His voice was casual conversational. Dad's been having a hard time lately, he said, shaking his head like it broke his heart to admit it. Memory slips confusion. You know how it goes." The group nodded politely. They didn't know me well enough to question it. Megan joined in, camera ready, as always. "It's been tough," she added, her tone soaked in fake sympathy. "He gets confused sometimes, even aggressive." "We're doing our best." Aggressive. That word stung. I hadn't raised my voice, much less a hand, in decades. The only broken thing in that house was the window Daniel cracked practicing his golf swing. But facts don't matter when someone's rewriting your story. They went on for nearly 15 minutes, turning my life into a character sketch. The confused old man, the unpredictable veteran, the burden they so graciously cared for. And people believed it. You could see it in their eyes, sympathy for them, discomfort toward me. But not everyone bought the act. From across the yard, I noticed a younger man watching quietly. Short haircut, calm posture, alert eyes. His name was David Morales, a staff sergeant stationed nearby. I'd met him once when he moved into the neighborhood. We'd talked about the Corps, about duty, about how the hardest battles are the ones you fight after coming home. David approached me, beer in hand. "How you holding up, sir?" he asked. "Fine," I said simply. He studied me for a moment. "Mind if I ask something?" "Go ahead. Your son's been telling people you forget things. Doesn't line up with the man I just talked to." I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed calm. "You learn to let people say what they need to," I said. "Eventually the truth speaks for itself." He gave a small nod, the kind only another Marine would understand. "If you ever need anything, sir," he said quietly, "you know where to find me." That one sentence hit harder than any insult Daniel could throw. It reminded me that there are still people who recognize strength, even when others try to bury it. Across the yard, Megan's phone was still recording. Daniel was playing his part perfectly, pretending to look protective as he guided me toward the gate. "Dad gets tired easily," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. I smiled and nodded, giving the crowd exactly what they expected, a polite, harmless old man. But inside, I was memorizing every word, every witness, every face that watched it happen. Because this wasn't humiliation anymore. It was evidence. By the time we got home, Daniel was practically glowing. "That went great," he said to Megan. "Everyone saw how much we care." I didn't answer. I just walked to my room, closed the door, and sat down with the digital recorder I'd kept running in my pocket the whole time. Every lie, every accusation, every fake display of sympathy, it was all there. That night I called Colonel James Porter. "How was the barbecue?" he asked. "Educational," I said. He didn't need more details. Marines don't need long explanations. You ready for Thursday? More than ready. "Good," he said, "because from what you've told me, this isn't family drama anymore. This is war." He was right. And the best part, they'd given me their battlefield and their audience. Colonel James Porter didn't suggest a lawsuit first. He suggested a platform. He said if they were going to smear me in front of the town, we'd meet them there and show the truth. That's how the idea of Memorial Day came up. Make no mistake, this wasn't vanity. It was strategy. The local VFW picks a grand marshal every year. It's a big deal in Fayetteville. Hundreds show up. Families, veterans, kids with flags. An honor like that gives you eyes and ears, and in our case, a microphone. James called me in the afternoon and laid it out plainly. He'd chair the committee. He'd nominate me. He'd make sure the motion passed. If Daniel wanted to perform his devoted son routine, he'd do it under 800 witnesses instead of a backyard of neighbors. That audience mattered. I felt the old knot in my stomach, the one that tightened before a patrol. Public events had always been hard for me. Crowds, noise, sudden movements, they pull at the threads of PTSD. But this was bigger than discomfort. This was about reclaiming narrative and dignity in a place where reputation carried weight. We prepared like troops. My uniforms were pressed, my medals dusted. Jimmy James went over the plan, short speech present. Evidence hand things off to legal counsel. Keep it calm. Keep it factual. Let the town's reaction do the rest. The goal wasn't to shame privately or to humiliate for sport. It was to expose a pattern of theft and deception before the community that had been manipulated. People trust what they see with their own eyes. If the story Daniel had been telling spread there, it would stick. If the truth showed up first, it would stick instead. Everything hinged on timing and clarity. We rehearsed how to present the records, the VA reports, and the recorder. We mapped the flow, who would speak when the restraining order would be presented, how to transition to legal steps. James would announce it formally. I would speak simply, thank the town acknowledge service, then reveal the facts. There's a moral calculus in going public. You risk escalation. You risk burning personal bridges. You risk feeding gossip. But staying quiet had already cost me too much. Privacy can protect perpetrators. Public accountability protects victims. On a practical level, I learned some things worth sharing. If you think someone is trying to take advantage of an elder document everything, keep originals in a safe place. Get independent medical records. Talk to a trusted attorney who knows local community dynamics. And if you choose to go public, plan it with people who understand both the law and the social stage. When the day came, I felt all the old nerves, but I also felt something else, a steadiness that comes from knowing the truth and having the proof to back it up. Daniel could still stand beside me, with his camera try to look caring, but the platform had shifted. The stage was ours to set. That's the strange thing about truth. When it's presented clearly, people tend to notice. And when a town of veterans stands up for one of their own, the echoes travel farther than any courtroom could. Memorial Day. Morning dawned bright and sharp, the kind of Carolina sky that looks painted blue, so pure it hurts your eyes. I was up at 5 kushra, the same way I'd been for 50 years. Habit, or maybe instinct. I pressed my dress blues one last time, lined up my ribbons by regulation, and polished the brass until the reflection looked back steady and clear. 3 purple hearts, 1 bronze star, proof that I'd been tested and survived. Daniel circled me like a stylist before a photo shoot, smiling that perfect smile for the cameras. "Dad, you look incredible, like a real Marine," he said. I almost laughed. For years he'd mocked those medals. Now they were his props. Megaphone in hand, filmed every move, turning my life into their stage play of family devotion. We drove to City Hall in his spotless BMW. Along the route, people were already gathering, kids waving flags, veterans in ball caps, the whole town humming with pride. Daniel coached me the entire way. Remember to smile, wave slowly. They love that stuff. He had no idea I was the one scripting this performance. The convertible weighted red paint gleaming under the morning sun. Colonel James Porter stood near the reviewing stand posture, straight eyes sharp. He looked every inch the Marine he still was. He greeted me with a firm handshake. "You ready for this?" "Richard been ready a long time," I said. The parade rolled out slow and steady, the band striking up the anthem. As we moved through the crowd, cheers rose like waves. I waved back, feeling the strange weight of it all, the pride, the history, and the quiet storm building inside me. When we reached the stand, Colonel Porter stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Grand Marshal Marine veteran, Richard Cole." Applause thundered. People stood. Even Daniel clapped proudly, the perfect sun playing to the crowd. Porter continued reading my record: 3 tours in Vietnam, 3 Purple Hearts, a bronze, a star. 25 years of service to this country. The applause swelled again, but this time I could feel eyes shifting toward me. Porter handed me the microphone. "Would you like to say a few words, sir?" I stood. The sunlight hit the medals across my chest, catching in every line of brass. I took a deep breath. The crowd hushed. "Thank you for this honor," I began. My voice was steady, not loud, just clear enough to carry. "For 3 years, some people have told you I'm a broken old man, that I'm confused, that I'm violent, that I've lost my mind." A ripple went through the audience. Daniel's smile froze. I saw Megan lower her phone. "They said I accused my own family of stealing from me." I continued. "They said I was paranoid. They said I was unfit to live on my own." I paused, letting the silence settle like dust after an explosion. "Today, I'm here to tell you the truth." I reached inside my jacket and pulled out the envelope. For 3 years, my son Daniel and his wife Megan have been stealing from me. They forged documents to take my house. They drained my accounts. They tried to have me declared incompetent, but they forgot one thing. I held up my VA medical report, reading the line that had saved me: "No evidence of cognitive decline or diminished capacity." Then the pension records proof of over $1 million they'd tried to claim. Finally, the small black recorder. "This," I said, "contains 47 minutes of their own words, mocking my PTSD, planning to sell my house, laughing about how they'd handle me once I was declared unfit." The crowd gasped. Murmurs broke out. Someone shouted, "Shame!" Daniel stepped forward, face flushed. "Dad." "You're confused," he said loudly. "You don't know what you're saying." I turned toward him. "No, son, I'm not confused. I'm a Marine, and Marines keep receipts." Colonel Porter stepped forward, holding a leather folder. "What you've just heard constitutes elder abuse financial fraud and forgery," he announced, voice booming through the speakers. "This is a restraining order effective immediately against Daniel and Megan Cole." He handed me the document. I turned and passed it to my son. The entire crowd was silent now. Every camera pointed at us. Daniel's hand trembled as he took it. "You're served," Porter said. The applause that followed wasn't the cheerful kind. It was a roar of support, raw and righteous. Veterans stood and saluted. Neighbors who once looked away now stepped closer. The lies had collapsed under the weight of daylight. A young Marine from the crowd, Staff Sergeant David Morales, walked forward. "Sir, do you need transport home?" "Yes, I do," I said. "Thank you, Sergeant." As he and 2 others escorted me through the crowd, I caught one last glimpse of Daniel and Megan standing on the stage with their reputations crumbling around them. Cameras flashed, people whispered. Justice sometimes isn't quiet. It's public. When we reached the truck, I looked back at the street lined with flags. It felt like closure, but not victory. Not really. Because the real battle wasn't about money or property. It was about truth, about showing people that age and trauma don't erase a person's worth. That no one has the right to rewrite your story for their convenience. That day I didn't just reclaim my house, I reclaimed my name. And sometimes that's the greatest victory of all. The morning after the parade, the house was silent in a way I hadn't heard in years. No footsteps, no voices upstairs, no Megan humming fake cheer in the kitchen, no Daniel barking orders. Just quiet, the kind that feels like air after a storm, heavy but clean. By sunrise, they were gone. The moving truck had shown up at dawn, and by the time the neighbors stirred, Daniel and Megan had packed their things and slipped away. No goodbyes, no apologies, just 2 shadows disappearing down Pine Street. By noon, the knock came at my door. A sheriff's deputy stood outside uniform, pressed expression professional but kind. He handed me a document confirming what Colonel Porter had set in motion. The restraining order was officially in effect. Daniel and Megan were prohibited from entering my property or accessing any of my financial accounts. That was the legal part. The moral part came later. At 2 p.m., the phone rang. It was Wells Fargo. "Mr. Cole, we've been reviewing your account," the representative said. "There appear to be multiple unauthorized transactions, totaling roughly $47,000 over the past 3 years. I didn't say much, just listened as she explained BMW lease payments, high-end retail purchases, luxury dinners, even a vacation to Myrtle Beach I'd never taken. "We're reversing all fraudulent charges," she continued, "and we've filed a report with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." I thanked her and hung up, staring at the phone for a long moment. For 3 years, Daniel had treated my money like his playground. Now the playground was gone, and the fence had gone up. By the next morning, the story hit the local paper. The Fayetteville Observer ran it on the front page under the headline, "Veteran Exposes Family Fraud in Front of 800 at Memorial Day Parade." The reporter had interviewed witnesses from the crowd. One neighbor said, "I always wondered why Daniel talked down to his dad. Now we know why." Another added, It's disgusting. Family doesn't treat family like that. Even the VFW issued a statement of support. Sergeant Richard Cole's courage reminds us that integrity doesn't retire with age. That line stuck with me. Integrity doesn't retire. Maybe that's what the entire ordeal had been about, showing people that resilience doesn't fade just because your hair does. But while I was finding peace, Daniel was losing ground fast. Word spread that he'd been terminated from his insurance job. Fraud investigations don't pair well with professional licenses. By Wednesday, his company issued a quiet statement about ethical standards, and ongoing investigations. The BMW he loved so much got repossessed 2 days later. Megan tried to keep up appearances on social media, but people weren't buying it anymore. Screenshots of the news article filled the comment sections. She deactivated her accounts by the weekend. From what I heard, they ended up at her mother's apartment across town, a 2-bedroom walk-up with peeling paint and no parking space. The same people who once strutted through my house in designer clothes now shared a futon and borrowed money for gas. Poetic justice, maybe. But I didn't celebrate it. There's no joy in watching your child destroy himself. It's just a quiet ache that never quite leaves. The neighbors, though, were different. One by one, they came by. Mrs. Johnson from across the street brought a casserole and a hug. We had no idea, she said, eyes wet. We should have seen the signs. I told her not to feel guilty. People believe what they're shown, and Daniel had been a master of performance. Others dropped off pies, coffee flowers. The same folks who'd once whispered about the confused old veteran now wanted to help however they could. Funny how quickly stories change once the truth gets oxygen. By Friday, local TV picked up the story. Reporters camped outside the VFW post, filming a segment about elder abuse and veterans' rights. My phone buzzed with messages from people I'd never met. Sons, daughters, even fellow veterans sharing their own experiences with financial manipulation or family betrayal. That's when I realized something. What happened to me wasn't rare. It just wasn't talked about. Pride keeps people silent. Shame keeps them trapped. But when one voice breaks the silence, others follow. That weekend, Colonel Porter dropped by. He handed me a copy of The Observer with the headline, circled in red ink. "Looks like the truth travels fast," he said. "It does when you shout it in front of 800 people, I replied. He laughed, then turned serious. "They'll face charges, elder abuse, fraud, forgery. It'll take time, but the law will handle the rest." I nodded. "I don't need revenge," I said quietly. "I just needed my name back." He smiled at that. "You got it, Marine." When he left, I stood on my porch watching the sun set over the neighborhood. For the first time in 3 years, I felt ownership not just of my house, but of my peace. The world had seen the truth. The lies were gone. The silence had finally broken. And as the evening light stretched across the front yard, I realized something simple but powerful. Justice doesn't always come from courtrooms. Sometimes it comes from standing tall, speaking plain, and refusing to let anyone else tell your story for you. The following week brought something I hadn't felt in a long time: closure. not the soft kind that fades over time, but the real hard-edged kind that arrives when truth finally outweighs lies. Colonel James Porter called me early Monday morning. His tone was steady, all business. "The district attorney's office has officially filed charges," he said. "Elder abuse, financial fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud." Hearing those words didn't make me happy. It made me quiet, because justice isn't about celebration. It's about balance. For 3 years, Daniel and Megan had built their comfort on deception. Now the scales had finally tipped the other way. The investigation moved faster than I expected. The evidence was undeniable. The fake signatures, the doctored paperwork, the bank records, the recordings. Every lie they told had a paper trail. Every act of greed left fingerprints. By the time they stood before the judge, they looked smaller somehow, like the weight of their own choices had shrunk them. Their lawyer tried to paint it as a family misunderstanding, a lapse in judgment caused by stress and grief. But the courtroom wasn't buying it. The prosecution laid everything bare. Financial statements showing unauthorized withdrawals totaling $47,000. Forged notary seals on transfer documents. Voice recordings of them plotting to sell my house once I was declared incompetent. Even the witnesses from the barbecue testified, confirming how Daniel and Megan had staged lies in front of the entire neighborhood. The judge's words were sharp but fair. "You exploited a man who trusted you," he said. "You weaponized his age, his grief, and his service. That is not family, it is fraud." When the verdict came, I didn't flinch. 2 years probation, each mandatory restitution of every stolen dollar, and community service at the VA hospital. They were also prohibited from contacting me directly or indirectly for the next 5 years. It wasn't prison time, but it was justice enough. They'd spend their days serving the very kind of people they once mocked, men and women who'd actually sacrificed something. Maybe they'd learn what respect looks like. The bank returned every cent that had been taken. My house was reinstated in my name, free and clear. No liens, no legal gray areas, no shadows left hanging over the deed. For the first time in years, I could look at the front porch and feel ownership again, not just of the property, but of the life it represented. I thought about what punishment really means. Most people imagine it's about pain or revenge, but real punishment is about understanding the damage you've done and living with the knowledge of it. Daniel would wake up every day knowing he'd betrayed his father. That's a sentence no court can shorten. When I walked through my home after the final court date, it felt different. The air was lighter. The walls no longer carried whispers of manipulation. Anna's old photographs were back where they belonged, her handwriting still visible on the frames. It felt like she was finally home, too. Colonel Porter stopped by that afternoon with 2 cups of coffee. "You did it, Richard," he said. "No," I told him. "We did it." He smiled. "You know, not everyone has the strength to fight this kind of battle at your age." I laughed. "Marines don't retire. We just change our missions." That night, I sat on the porch watching the sky turn gold over the rooftops. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I'd learned something important, that peace doesn't come when others are punished. It comes when you stop letting their actions define you. Justice had done its part. Now it was time for something harder healing. Life has a strange way of circling back to peace once the noise fades. The legal storm had passed, the house was quiet again, and for the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling like I was waiting for the next attack. What came after justice wasn't revenge, it was renewal. The first sign of that came from Colonel Porter. A week after the verdict, he invited me to the VFW hall. I thought it was just for coffee, but when I walked in, the room was packed. Veterans from every era filled the seats from Vietnam to Afghanistan. On the wall behind the podium was a banner that read, "The Richard Cole Elder Justice Fund, protecting veterans from family exploitation." For a moment, I couldn't move. My name didn't belong on a banner like that, or so I thought. But Porter explained it simply. "You turned your pain into purpose," he said. "Now we'll make sure no other veteran faces what you did alone." The fund provided legal aid, financial counseling, and emotional support to older veterans being manipulated or abused by relatives. Within 3 months, we'd already helped a dozen men and women. Some had lost homes. Some had lost money. All had lost trust. What they needed most wasn't just legal defense. It was to feel seen, believed, and valued again. Seeing them reminded me how easy it is for good people to end up trapped in quiet despair. Pride keeps you from asking for help. Shame keeps you from speaking up. That's why the fund mattered. It gave people permission to reclaim dignity without fear. Around that same time, the Morales family began showing up more often. David, the young Marine, who had seen through Daniel's act at the barbecue, started stopping by after his shifts. His wife, Maria, brought her famous tamales every Sunday. Their 2 kids, Emma and Diego, treated me like family from day one. One evening, I was sitting on the porch when Emma ran up the steps clutching a drawing of me in my dress blues. "You're our hero," she said. I smiled, trying not to tear up. Somewhere between losing my son and gaining this family, I realized something profound. Blood makes you related, but love makes you family. We started having dinners together every Friday. Sometimes we talked about the old days. Other times, we just laughed about nothing. Maria refused to let me eat frozen meals anymore. David fixed the loose boards on my porch without being asked. When he called me Pop, it didn't feel forced. It felt right, Doctor. Hayes, my VA psychiatrist, said my PTSD symptoms had improved more in 6 months than they had in 15 years. She told me healing doesn't just come from medicine. It comes from meaning. And she was right. The nightmares had faded. The shaking hands steadied. I was sleeping again. Healing, I learned, isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of peace. One morning, I found myself in the living room, looking at the medals Anna had framed before she passed. For years, they'd felt like a reminder of what I'd survived. Now they felt like proof of what I'd built since. Not just battles fought overseas, but the one I'd fought here against betrayal, against silence, against fear. The fund kept growing. Veterans from other towns began reaching out, News outlets called it a grassroots movement, but to me, it was simpler than that. It was community Marines, soldiers, nurses, teachers, neighbors, banding together to say, "This will not happen again." I sometimes wonder if Daniel ever thinks about what happened. He's still under probation, still paying restitution. We haven't spoken, and maybe we never will. But I've let go of the anger. Carrying it would only give the past more power than it deserves. Instead, I choose gratitude for Colonel Porter's loyalty, for David's friendship, for Maria's warmth, for Emma's laughter. They helped me rebuild something. Daniel could never steal trust. Now every sunrise on that porch feels like a promise kept to Anna, to the men I served with, to the person I almost lost in myself. It's never too late to rebuild your life. It's never too late to find your people. And it's never too late to believe once again that the world can still be kind. The hardest part of survival isn't the battle itself, it's what comes after. When the smoke clears and justice is done, you're left standing in the silence, trying to figure out what to do with the life you fought to keep. That's where I found myself on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the morning light fall across the same yard I nearly lost. Daniel tried to reach out twice after the court ruling. Both times it came through my lawyer. He wanted to talk to make things right, but there are conversations that no longer belong in this life. Forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't always require reunion. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is draw a boundary and hold it with quiet strength. So all communication now goes through legal channels. No exceptions, no more gaslighting, no more manipulation disguised as family concern. That chapter closed the moment I took back my name. With the legal mess behind me, I started focusing on what came next, what could come from all of it. The Elder Justice Fund had grown faster than any of us expected. We'd started small, helping veterans in Fayetteville who were being financially or emotionally exploited. But word spread. Donations came in from other states. Retired servicemen sent letters thanking us for doing what they never had the courage to do. Speak up. I decided then that my estate, every cent of my pension, my home, even the savings Anna and I built together, would go to the fund after I'm gone. It felt right. Money that once represented pain would become a shield for others. Colonel Porter helped me formalize the plan. You're leaving a legacy that protects your brothers and sisters in arms, he said. That's more than most people ever do. He was right. For years I thought legacy meant medals and achievements, but real legacy isn't what you collect, it's what you give back. Life slowly began to take on color again. The Morales family became part of my daily rhythm. Emma stopped by after school to show me her art projects. David mowed the lawn when I wasn't looking. And Maria still refused to let me skip dinner even when I said I wasn't hungry. And then came Mary Patterson. I met her at a veterans benefit dinner, widow of a Navy pilot. Graceful, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who carried sadness and strength in the same breath. We started talking about life after loss, about what it means to build something new when the old foundations are gone. We took it slow the way older hearts do, walks around the lake, coffee on Sundays, conversations that ran deep but never heavy. She understood the silences, the pauses, the memories that sneak up without warning. One evening, as we watched the sunset from her porch, she said, "You've been through hell, Richard, but you didn't let it turn you bitter." I smiled. "Hell's not the end of the world," I said. "It's just the place that shows you what you're made of. PTSD still visits sometimes, but not like before." Dr. Hayes says that's what happens when the source of stress is finally removed. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about reclaiming peace one quiet morning at a time. Now my days are filled with simple things. I tend the small garden Anna once started. I visit the VFW twice a week to mentor younger veterans. And when I sit on my porch at dawn, I don't see ghosts anymore. I see possibility. I don't know how many years I have left, but I do know this dignity isn't something life gives you. It's something you defend one choice at a time. I lost a son, but I found something stronger. Purpose, peace, and a chosen family who reminds me that goodness still exists. And when my time comes, I'll leave knowing I didn't just survive. I rebuilt, I gave back, and I left the world a little safer for those who wear the uniform after me. Because the real border of dignity isn't a line others draw for you. It's the one you refuse to let anyone cross again. If you've followed my story this far, maybe it's because something in it feels familiar. Maybe you've seen a parent, a grandparent, or even yourself being dismissed, ignored, or quietly taken advantage of. I didn't think it could happen to me either. I was a Marine, a survivor of 3 wars, a man who'd stared down death and won. But betrayal doesn't always come from the enemy. It often walks in through your own front door. What I learned is this: it's never too late to fight back. Not with anger, but with truth. Not with violence, but with evidence. You don't have to be young or strong or fearless. You just have to decide that your dignity is worth defending. That decision alone changes everything. For years, I thought silence was strength. I let things slide, told myself family is family, that forgiveness meant letting people cross every line. But silence only protects the wrong person. Speaking up doesn't make you weak, it means you've finally remembered who you are. Age doesn't make us helpless, it makes us sharper, wiser, more dangerous to those who underestimate us. You can strip a person of money, of property, even reputation. But you can't take away what they've earned inside. Experience is its own weapon, and when used with patience and purpose, it cuts cleaner than any sword. If I could go back and talk to the man I was 3 years ago, the one sitting quietly at that kitchen table, apologizing for existing, I'd tell him this: you are not a burden. You are not done. And no one, not even your own blood, has the right to decide your worth. I hope my story serves as proof that justice isn't about revenge. It's about remembering your value and refusing to let others define it for you. Whether you're 74 or 24, you can still stand your ground, still fight smart, and still win. To anyone listening, who suspects their parents or grandparents might be going through something similar. Don't wait. Ask questions. Check in. Look for signs: missing money, isolation, guilt that shouldn't be there. Financial abuse rarely starts with theft. It starts with control. And if you're the one being manipulated, please know, help exists. There are organizations, lawyers, veterans groups, and people who will listen without judgment. You don't have to handle it alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pick up the phone. I used to think my story ended the day my family betrayed me. Turns out that was just the beginning. What came after wasn't just survival. It was purpose. Through the Elder Justice Fund, we've helped veterans reclaim what's theirs, and in doing so, I've found something I didn't know. I still had peace. If there's one truth I'll leave you with, it's this: getting older doesn't make you weaker. It makes you smarter about which battles are worth fighting. And this one, this battle for dignity, for respect, for the right to be seen as whole, is worth every ounce of strength you've got left. So share this story. Tell it to someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there, another voice is being silenced by shame or fear, and your courage to speak might be exactly what sets them free.